Good evening and welcome to Gator's Garage in the great city of Savannah, Georgia. We're the headquarters of all things historical gaming in and around Savannah, Georgia. And coming to you on recording this evening, we have, of course, with us the other half of our dynamic duo, Randy Jan. Randy, say hi to the folks.
Hello, everybody. I'm coming to you from the middle of nowhere in Fitzgerald, Georgia.
Yeah, we drag Randy to Savannah when we have an opportunity, so he can get a little bit of civilization, if that's what you call it. But yeah,
I can
we
get a
appreciate
steak
we
dinner
appreciate
anyway.
that a lot. Do what, Randy?
I can get a steak dinner anyway.
You can get a good steak dinner, that's for sure and
Yeah,
certain. Absolutely. That reminds me, I got a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse gift card sitting
ooh,
around here somewhere I haven't used. Of
really?
course, it would probably cover an appetizer. That
Yeah, I'm
place
gonna
is pretty
say,
pricey.
and you need a three-piece suit to go in the place.
No doubt. Well, I can cover that. That's not a problem. Oh,
You know, so a little
I'll put my
side
leather.
story. I
I'll put
went.
my. I'll go ahead.
I went to a service school up in North Carolina, and we went in to eat at a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And the mechanic that was with me, he had on a baseball cap, and they stopped him at the door and said, "Sir, you're not allowed to wear those in here."
Yep. Some places are still pretty formal. I was going to say I could
Yeah,
probably get by with my leather cloak and a tie. It'd probably
yeah,
come off pretty good. Gabby picked me up this good-looking burgundy vest for my birthday, and I wore that this past Sunday, and I was like, "Wow, it looks really good." She says she
yeah.
likes to dress me up, so there you go. Anyway, so again, welcome, folks. Before we get to pardon the little sidebar there, but before we get too deep into this, be sure you like and share and subscribe and leave comments in the comment section. You can comment about me and Randy, or you can comment about the rules. Ask questions. We will provide answers, either me or Randy, or if we don't know, we will find out who does. But yeah, this is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. And besides that, it helps improve our rankings with the YouTube algorithms, and that's always a good thing. If you want to support
Yep.
us like we're doing, a couple things you can do: buy merch from the store, Gator Games and Books, or you can buy us a cup of coffee at Ko-Fi or Patreon. Links for all that will be in the section below, and the link, of course, to Randy's channel, 1944 Bolt
It's
Action, right?
Bolt Action 1944.
Bolt Action 1944. And Randy tends to specialize in long form video game playthroughs, not video,
Yep.
tabletop game playthroughs that he videos. So if you want to literally watch an experienced player at work as he walks through the different elements, I know he did a short recently about how to run an ambush. Randy, I was real pleased with that because not only was you had some good points, there were some folks that came on and they were like, well, depends on the terrain, depends on this. Of course it does,
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
general principles matter. So, but again, people are talking, and that's the important thing.
yeah.
Um,
It was a Recce platoon tutorial.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was it. That was it. Yeah, and the Recce platoon option is really interesting in the new bolt action because you can now take an infantry Recce platoon. You got to motorize it or you got to mechanize it, really.
yep.
But it's another platoon. That means another command section, and other add-ons that you can get. Plus, it is Recce, so all that comes in very, very, very handy. So that's a lot of what we like to talk about on this show is the different platoons. If you're tracking what Warlord's putting out, they recently came out with a discussion on reserves that I thought was pretty informative. Now, Randy, I'll be right honest. I think I always forget to use the reserve rule. Do you make pretty good use of it?
Well, in a limited way. Actually, I will hardly never outflank. It just doesn't make sense to keep your guys off the table for 3 turns or more if they don't come on. But reserves, I typically like to keep most of my stuff on the table and doing stuff. But a lot of times I'll put my armor in reserve because I want to see where the enemy is going to deploy their armor, rather than just trust that I'm going to, have the last dice out of the bag and get to deploy where I want to. So many times I've tried that and I end up having to deploy it, and then they deploy and take a shot at me, and it usually
Okay.
didn't go well.
Well, I think I've used it once or twice. Um, Definitely can see the value of it. I think you raise a valid point, and the article addresses as well that if you are going to outflank, you don't want to cut yourself so low that you can't move on the objective. So,
Mhm.
outflanking again, just like using a Reese platoon, it's going to be dependent on a few things. Um, One thing I think, to your point, if you put your armor in reserve, then you can put them into outflank as well. So that's pretty handy. Um, One of the points the article made, and they're right, is instead of using green troops, a lot of us like to use green for transports. You want to use regular, or you're taking that extra -1 when you're coming in recce or when you're coming in reserve. The other thing is, and I just need to, it's like so many of the rules that we have. Just need to remember to use it more. But I can see where putting a squad in a half track, or a bazooka team in a jeep that can come in on the flank and just kind of throw your opponent off. I mean, let's take the two scenarios. I like to run Panzer Grenadiers, and so let's say I take one of those precious half tracks and I throw him off to the side with maybe a squad and a commander. And you bring them in. Well, now I've got a command team, a squad, and a half track in your rear area. And if the squad's got a light machine gun and the half track's got a light machine gun, I can put some arrows of fire down in your rear area and cause no end of mischief. And in some of the scenarios, it's a good way for me to get into your back area and score points or capture objectives.
Yeah, I've actually considered trying the Gurkhas in an outflank scenario because
Yeah,
they take fire moving across the table. Well, if I can outflank them, then I can just move them without being shot at, and then they can come on and do stuff in the back line where I want them.
and aren't there certain? I don't know if the Gurkhas are one, but there are certain units that don't take that negative for the reserve role.
Yeah, any American units and like your commandos, your British commandos.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's all go commando.
yeah.
But okay,
So yeah, so one of the ways to use the reserves too is some people still taking flamethrowers, so you can put a flamethrower in a transport. And what I would say is still take the inexperienced transport. But we got so many officers out there, just throw an officer in it. He's going to give his bonus. That's going to negate any negative from it being inexperienced.
throw one of them 90-day wonders in there.
Yeah. So the benefit of the reserve is like when you deploy in a section. But when you come on reserve, you can come in anywhere on
Right.
that your table edge. So your opponent doesn't know where you're coming. Is when you're off the board, he's moving up. He doesn't know, So like before, you could come on your spot, and then he knows you're confined to that area, and he
That's
can
right.
avoid that. But then if you're in reserve, now he
Yeah.
has to be careful because wherever he goes, I can come on. And
Right.
then, if you say you got a bazooka team in a Jeep, throw an officer in it and a bazooka team. That's three guys. And
Yeah.
so he's pushing up on me. I've got my Jeep in reserve. And when he gets close enough, boom, the Jeep runs on 12 inches. The bazooka team jumps out 6. And I might even be shooting at point blank at that point.
Those are those are
Even
great points.
if it doesn't do anything but force him to not push up, make him keep his tanks back. That's a
Right.
benefit. I'm spending about 80 points to keep a tank out of my area.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Um, I'm looking to see where the reserves rules are. Should have had them up in front of me here. Um, anyway, I think the reserves can come on. I'm gonna sound pretty ignorant here, but the reserves can always come on your deployment edge. But I think if you hold
DZE,
them out for a
deployment
number
zone
of
edge.
turns, yeah. But if you hold them out for a number of turns, they can come up the side, and that's where, to me, that's where you get your value. Is when you can when you can swing around the side of somebody's flank, like you were saying. Speaking of flamethrowers, by the way, I don't know if you caught it, but and I don't know if it was this in version 2, but got my teeth a little rattled the other day because I'm reading the rules for there it is. Um, I'm reading the rules for flamethrowers, and did you know that if you fire a flamethrower at a building, you got a 50% chance of setting that building on fire, and if it's on fire, it runs everybody out.
Yeah, that's always been that way.
Okay. I don't
Yeah.
use flamethrowers a lot, and so I may have to reassess some of that because I know I have options for flamethrowers, in any of the German lists I run. By the way, um, if you've not looked at that new veteran set and talking to the viewers as well, we're going to have it in stock. The German veteran set is definitely going to be worth looking at if you want to add in some specialist troops because you're going to be able to build flamethrower troops, anti-tank troops, tank hunters. I would really like that veteran set, but all that to be said, that I'm having to really rethink flamethrowers now because that's a good alternative to HE for burning buildings out. And yeah, looking at the it's called outflanking here, and turn 3 onward, uh, you can uh, you can move on to either side. So yeah, outflanking is real important and
Yeah.
can really change the flavor of a game.
Yeah. The only problem with using a flamethrower just to set a building on fire is it runs out on 2 now, and you take a pin every time you use it.
Okay, good points.
The
Good
pin's
points.
not really that big a deal because if you keep an officer nearby,
Yeah,
it's going to negate that. But yeah, the one thing that really stacks pins is the multi launchers now because they get D3 pins.
right,
Yeah,
right.
so they can, and most people take them in experience, so those could get pinned out real easy if you're not careful.
Yeah, yeah. That's I've always disagreed with taking inexperience. I know there's tournament players that do better than I do, but there might be particular times where I'll take inexperienced troops, but by and large, if I'm building a general list, it's going to be regular or veteran. We'll everybody will get to find out the how that works here in a couple of weeks when we square off. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
You're going to be running British commandos, and I'll be running Germans of some flavor or another. Probably
paratroop.
standard Germans with
Yes.
uh with with an armored platoon, a support platoon, and I may have a Fallschirmjäger squad in there for some stiffening. So
Yeah,
see how that
just
works
so
out.
they'll be paratroopers, not commandos.
Okay, paratroopers. Also,
Quite a bit
still
of
nasty.
difference. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
so the beauty. So what I'm looking at is speaking of paratroopers, is trying to replace Gurkhas in my
Right.
list, trying to find
Oh,
something. Of course, the regular infantry squad with 2 light machine guns is really good.
yep.
But with so many objectives now and the need to hold objectives, I'm thinking that being stubborn is really going to be helpful because they can take casualties and they just don't care.
Right.
You're going to have to
Right.
just kill every last man off really before you get rid of them.
Well, and remember, sometimes you're going to have to hold that objective by being on it. Sometimes you can hold that objective just by driving your opponent, away from that section of the field.
Yeah.
So it's really going to depend on, again, on the situation. But you make a valid point. Just about every game we play where we have objectives, you want to put your most stubborn, best troops holding that objective or at least securing it from at a distance to keep your opponent from moving in on it. So yeah, that's absolutely a valid point there. But yeah, so reserves, if you're not using them, something to think about. Again, the trade-off is you're kind of weakening your initial punch. I think General Patton had it right. You're kind of trying to grab him by the nose and kick him in the butt. So if you can pull it off, I think it's worth trying. Like I say, I've done it once or twice. I think I've had mixed results. You do kind of surrender your fate to the hands of the dice, and Mike Baker will tell you he don't like to do that too often. But
Yeah.
every now and again, I'll feel lucky. I think having that +2 officer though definitely helps overcome that. So yeah, absolutely using the reserves. Would not surprise me to see me or Randy both use reserve next week. And I think I don't. This may have been in the pre, but one of the other situations you talked about, maybe we just talked about it now. It's been a long day. Um, is the ability to get some of those foot troops up the board without advancing them under fire. So,
Yeah.
like, I think you were saying your ever popular Gurkhas, right? I was thinking a Jeep with a bazooka coming off the side could cause no end of mayhem.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like about version 2 is the fact that shape charges count as HE against buildings. I think that was long overdue,
Yeah.
and suddenly your bazooka teams become a much more variable threat.
Yeah. The only downside is that buildings have gotten so dangerous now that nobody's likely to jump in a building anymore. It's probably just not going to happen unless you have a list that just doesn't have any HE in it. But
Yeah,
if you got a howitzer or a bazooka in your list or something, they're probably not going in a building.
yeah. Buildings they were rather dangerous under the old HE rules, but you got such cover benefits from being in them.
Yeah.
Now, what do you get? You get a 4+ because it's hardcover, right? Um, you can push that up a little bit, I think, to a 2+ if you go down.
Yeah.
But that's a cover save. You're not hard
Yeah.
to hit anymore.
Yeah. You're going
That
to get hit.
really has, yeah, it really has changed the taste of the game. But even in the old rules, going into a building, if you were getting hit by HE or a flamethrower, they didn't have to. They could hit the building, and that was 4. Even then, it was 3+, 4+, and now it's 4+. They fire at the building, so it's going to make its own hole, if you will.
Yeah. That's
So
that's the
yeah,
one thing I really had an issue with in version 2 is,
right,
if I'm shooting at a building, it doesn't matter whether there's a squad in it or not. It should be the same chance of hitting that building. And even if I'm not trying to hit the unit, if I can do enough damage to that building to collapse it, that should be just as easy as whether there's somebody in it or not.
right. And I I don't remember the exact reference, but it's somewhere where I was reading that you can target buildings with HE and indirect and attempt to bring them down, whether or not
Yeah.
there's troops in them.
Yeah.
So a good use for your medium howitzer, if it's got nothing else to do, drop that building.
Yeah.
And then somebody loses an upper, because I guess now the big advantage of buildings is going to be your double level buildings where people can get up and get line of sight. Your lower level buildings are kind of a mixed blessing. They're still a better save against small arms than woods are, but Lord help you if the other guy's got artillery and he's going to
Well,
ruin
and
your
I
day.
think what's going to happen too, see, if people used to put their spotters and snipers in buildings, they were pretty
Hmm.
much immune. I mean, because they always counted as down, and it's hard cover and small team. For a spotter, it was near impossible to kill a spotter in a building unless you just ran in and assaulted him. And now you hit it with a bazooka, and it's going to do D6 hits, and the
Hmm.
spotter's dead. I mean, he's just going to die.
Right, right, right. Um, Thinking about that though, and this is kind of a look back, and we don't want to cause a bunch of confusion. But even now, the way to deal with, like you say, the bazooka or the HE on the spotter, and they're done. They're going away. Or your friend the sniper. Snipers, I think, have become a lot more valuable. Um, for taking out officers and those small teams, and they are small, so that's something to think about.
Yeah.
Uh, Another area that's just not gotten a lot of play yet. I think you and I were saying that you've used some of them in some of your playthroughs, and again, folks want to check your channel. Um, and that's some of these new optional rules that have been put into the rule book, and I've seen some mixed discussion on that. Oh, gee, one more thing, but um, I think it's really important if we're going to be historical gamers that we do more than just make that tournament run all the time. I think there's a place for tournament play, um, but I know there's also I think if folks will take a step back, there's a similar place for story driven play. And that's where these scenarios really do provide a good toolbox. And by the way, the campaign books are all still in print. And the
Yeah.
campaign book scenarios are written with specific, you can either buy points or they're written with specific forces in mind. So, as we're moving forward, those stories are still they're still there. They're worth playing. I know, Randy, you've got the D-Day book, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you look through there, there's some very cool scenarios. And then
Yeah.
I've got Tough Gut, so I've got some of the
Yeah.
Italian campaign scenarios. So
Yeah. So we got a
I think
special
go ahead.
terrain for Carrington and
Right?
Breakcourt Manor and
Yes.
what's the other one? No, I've been working on Purple Heart Lane. That one's
Right.
coming up. I'm hoping to do that one next year. But yeah,
Okay.
so it's good to do these little historical scenarios. And the trick is when you do them, of course it's going to be unbalanced, but you try to mitigate that so that both sides have fun
That's
when you
right.
play.
Yeah. Well, quite few ways that you can do that. You may get 5 points for each gun that you capture, thinking of Breakcourt Manor.
Hmm.
Um, but you're going to lose, 5 points for each team that you lose. And if you get the captain killed, well, that's about 20 points because he's the hero. You know,
Yeah.
um, and so there, to your point, there's a way to even put the guys on the back foot. Um, and balance that out. We were if anybody follows my blog, I played a game of squad leader this last weekend, advanced squad leader, Greeks versus Italians. Now, you want to talk about just neither army's the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
Um, and the Italians, especially, just wow. Just if you think the Italians in Bolt Action are bad, you should see the Italians in advanced squad leader. Oh my gosh. Um, and the Greeks were pretty solid. They have about an average firepower, average morale range, all that stuff. But the Italians were running, and so the Greeks had to catch them. So again, it was a scenario that was kind of set up to play to the Greeks, to the Italians, more to the Italian strength and what they were trying to do, certainly within the historical. So that's something to think about too. And don't be afraid to use, even make some special rules for your different armies. So looking at the optional rules that are already in the book, air landing reinforcements, absolutely cool. Now, it looks like you can do a combat jump, which is a hoot. Um,
Yeah, I'm,
so you
I'm
can actually
excited to
do
do something with my airborne guys at some point.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't know if you
it,
saw it, but there was one of the groups. I'll have to oh tabletop battles. I think maybe did it just the other day. They did it was an island scenario. So what happened is these Marines were on a boat. The boat got destroyed, so they got in a lifeboat and they landed on this island, and they split up into little patrols, and then the Japanese were on the island and they were in patrols. And so the Marines were trying to find a radio tower to radio for help. And neither, in the beginning, it was all scouting. Neither army was aware that they were there. So
oh
until
wow,
contact was made, the
right,
Japanese were doing random movement. So he would roll a d6 plus a scatter dice to see which way his patrols were going. And then if the Americans were running through the woods, it increased the chances of them being spotted. And then once they got
right.
spotted, then the game actually begins. But they had like a scouting scenario to begin with, so it was really cool.
That really is cool.
Yeah,
Wow. I mean, at the end of the day, the thing to really think about when you're playing is, man, we can tell some really good stories on the tabletop.
yeah,
So yeah, we've got rules for combat jump, which is just a hoot. Uh, I love the alternative rules for combat jump. Hold the die roughly 2 foot above the table and let it go.
remember we
I know
talked
one
about
time.
putting little parachutes on the guys and holding them over the table and see where they land.
Yeah, yeah, getting man, there used to the dime store used to have like these cheapo paratroops you could get. Those would be perfect. I
Yeah.
know I played a scenario with the kids at Alan's school one time, a bolt action scenario, and I literally just took the order dice for both sides and just rolled them out down the sides of the table and said, "All right, everybody set up where you see an order die." And
Mm.
and so what happened is they were immediately engaged, which
Yeah.
especially when you've got new players, or if you really just want to get stuff started.
There's no boring part of that game, is there?
No, no, because they were almost immediately engaged. And again,
Yeah.
you flip through some of the scenario books and some of the scenarios in some of the other games, and oh my gosh, I mean, you start off right there in each other's face, and away you go. So, yeah, the kids absolutely enjoyed it. They were like, "That was so much fun." Because quite often what we'll do is, okay, draw a die and deploy, and that takes like 30 minutes, right? No, there was no 30 minutes. It was let's go. They got
Oh.
rules for glider landing here, which looks pretty cool.
Hmm.
And again, you got this really complicated roll dice, check this, mark that, or they say make a paper airplane and throw it over your shoulder.
Yeah.
And I love it. I think
Yeah.
I really like the physical one better. I did see one set of rules where you had markers for the like for the paratroopers, and you put the markers on a ruler about 12 inches above the table and just dumped them, and that's where your troops landed.
Yeah.
Um, and so I assume you haven't used either one of those yet in your games.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's amphibious assaults. And again, this can be everything from D-Day
Yeah.
to commando raids on small beaches. And let me tell you, there was a lot of commando actions in 43 and 44. As what Saint Nazaire was the biggest one, but there were actions in and around Norway. Now I got to tell you, quite often it was 100% casualties for the commandos. Uh, but often they knew the risk going in, and they achieved their objective and drove the Germans crazy. Hitler actually at one point put a bounty and ordered all commandos to be shot. Um,
Well,
it,
Market Garden, I think the first Airborne lost 80% of their
oh
guys,
yeah,
and
yeah,
their 101st is, they actually rescued what was left of them.
right, right. Well, and the couple of backstories there. The Germans jumped into Arnhem in 1940,
Hmm.
and the Dutch kicked their teeth in.
Really?
Yeah, if you watch the old 1960s movie A Bridge Too Far,
Hmm.
one of the British commandos says, "Didn't the Jerry's jump in there and get the crap kicked out of them?" Oh yeah, but that was the Germans. Well,
Yeah.
guess what?
So that is, hold on a second. I want to
Bit-
grab something since you mentioned the bridge too far.
Yeah, yeah. So, and these are things you have to take into account. My dad, who was a paratrooper, will tell you if you're doing an airdrop, you can plan on 25% casualties. So, airdrops are fun. Um, you're not going to want to do them on a table that has a lot of terrain because that's going to potentially cause casualties. So, you're going to want more of an open table. And again, it's more of a thematic thing. And quite often, mostly allied drops were at night. I think the only two that were during the day, I think Varsity was the only one that was during the day. Market Garden might have been, but I
Yeah.
know Varsity was a daylight jump. But by then, the Allies had like total air superiority, and I remember the Germans thinking, "Wow, wish we could have done that." Of
So
course, it
I
great.
went
Germans
to
lost. Go ahead.
the local thrift store yesterday when I had my dog dropped off at the vet, and
Right,
there
poor
was a
doggy.
trove of videos. So I
Oh,
found a bridge too far.
very cool.
Yeah. And then I got Victory at Sea.
Oh my goodness.
Talks about a bunch of sea battles. Of
Yeah,
course, the
that's a
longest
great
day.
series.
I got the longest day.
Okay, and those are
World
still
War
in
II,
shrink.
the Air War,
Wow.
World War II in HD.
Okay.
Really nice one. I got the Desert Fox.
Ooh,
Yep. And then Battle of Britain.
very cool.
So I'm excited to watch some of these. I think I've watched, I know I've watched The Longest Day. a long time
I've
ago.
watched I've watched The Bridge Too Far. I've watched
Yeah,
The Longest Day. Uh, I think that's it, of the ones that you had there. So, why are we looking at movies, folks? Because that's part of the inspiration of the game. And
yeah,
you'd be surprised watching through movies where you can get just some really good ideas for scenarios. And
yeah.
sometimes, honestly, it's just good to take a breath. Randy, something we haven't done in a couple of years, probably since I left Waycross. We've not done our July 4th Band of Brothers. What was it? Not Band of Brothers. Saving Private Ryan. Remember we did that one year? Were you there when we did that?
No, I must
Yeah,
have
we
missed
had
that.
about Yeah, it was July 4th weekend, not
Yeah,
July 4th weekend. It was D-Day weekend. Remember, we always make so guys, our club always makes or we at least we try to make a big deal out of D-Day. And what we did that year is the 4 weeks leading up to D-Day, and I want to say it was like the 75th anniversary. So the 4 weeks leading up to D-Day, I ran, of course, the mega um, Memoir 44 landing scenarios.
yeah,
And oh, that was amazing. We weren't doing bolt action at the time, I don't think. And then we finished the weekend off with we had everybody over to the house, and we watched Saving Private Ryan.
yeah,
And yeah, it's one of those things. John Russell's got a phrase. He says, "You come to a game community for the games, but you really do stay for the fellowship."
yeah,
And that's watching, looking at your movies. And honestly, maybe you should come over, maybe I'll have some extra time and we can watch one. We'll send
yeah,
Gabby and the kids somewhere and we'll take over the living room. But yeah, so at the end of the day, this hobby is all about fellowship.
yeah,
So looking at some other optional rules, and I love optional rules. The longer I play games, the more I like optional rules, man, because just gives you a chance to change things up. And again, quite often you want to make sure you got the agreement of your opponent. Usually you're putting the scenario together, and so you guys kind of know what's going on. They've got some special rules for city fighting here. Randy, have you used these yet?
no, no, I haven't.
Any
And
of the
this will
rubble
be good
rules?
for like when you're running a tournament. Each
Sure.
table is going to have specific rules. So, like if you have a total city board on your table, then you're going to use these rules on this table.
Well, and we've done that before. We'll look as we get further down. We're actually going to see some rules very similar to some of the rules that we have used before in
Implemented.
our tournaments.
Yeah.
The only challenge there is making sure that the players remember the special rules, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Like the
yeah.
rain. Well, we forgot to roll for rain this
Oops.
turn
Yeah.
in the jungle.
Forgot to roll for rain. Forgot to roll for sandstorms. But yeah,
Yeah.
so the city fighting, they actually take it to a whole level that's just really wild. Um, and it kind of supplements the building rules. But yeah, fighting and sitting and city and rubble is just a whole other animal. Sewer movement. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So one of the most fun that Trish ever had was playing, believe it or not, I think it was guards counterattack squad leader
Yeah.
using the sewer movement. Oh yeah. So I'm really glad to see that in here. Not a lot of games cover that element. On the Eastern Front, especially, it was really important. Um, and it looks like you can do that. It's a -2. Wow.
Okay.
If you roll a
I'm
foobar,
feeling
you get
that.
lost. Oops.
So, all right.
Wow.
So, in Carrington, the
Yeah.
Falschmagers were in the sewers. They used the sewers.
Okay.
So, maybe we need to implement that in our next Carrington scenario.
I couldn't agree more. And if I'd have thought about that, we actually could have used the rules from squad leader. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. There I go. I can't resist giving a plug for my favorite game. But yeah, and actually, because as I recall, the paratroopers have a really hard time in that scenario. The
Yeah.
the sewer movement could really now here it's sewer movement for outflanking, but it could be easily modified for moving between sewer uh, uh sewer markers. Now, do you have sewer markers already on your Carentan board?
No, I'll have
Be
to
easy
make
to make
some.
them. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, yeah, be easy
25
peasy.
millimeter base. Boom.
Boom, done. Yeah, yeah. And I hope we're inspiring some of the folks that are listening, just thinking of some different ways that you can do things. I really like the idea of putting sewer movement when the next time we do a tournament, sewer movement, especially if a cross movement with these rules on rubble. I think it could really add some flavor to the tournament. Um, Desert
Imagine if you
warfare.
get into close combat down in the sewers.
Well, usually, and you could do that. Usually, what you see, the most common thing you might see would be somebody coming up on a sewer marker in the middle of an enemy position, and that's like instant close combat when that happens,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing. So, yeah, I think we'll want to play test that, but I can definitely see us throwing that into one of our next tournaments because we've got a bit of a reputation for coming up with some pretty interesting boards and scenario rules, and I think that would be just a heck of a lot of fun. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I still want to
but
implement the red barrels, the red fuel barrels, where you if you shoot it and you hit the barrel and you roll for it to explode, it creates a flamethrower effect in a 6-inch radius.
we wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'd want to stay away from
That would be
red barrels.
so that would be a really good one if we had a scenario set up with like a fuel dump or supply dump or an airfield. That would be, and we've
Yeah.
yet to put an airfield on the table. That would be really interesting.
Yeah. I'm
So
going to be
yeah, hold
building one
that
of
one in
those
reserve.
next year too.
Yeah.
That's one of the table
Yeah.
I
So
really
keep
want to have.
yeah, y'all keep watching. Now I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw,
You
but
know,
Airfix is coming out. The Warlord is going to start carrying the Airfix plastic aircraft, and they might be just the ticket to use as props, either as objectives. Look at me doing a shameless plug here, but they might be just the thing to use as objectives. Now I think they're 1/72nd scale,
yeah.
so they're a little small, but they would still make good objectives or good to use for marking your air support. Just
Yeah.
something to think about. Can't imagine where you would get them. No, nowhere like Gator Games or anything. But there you go. Um, so desert warfare, and we've done some desert tables with some rules, and there's some pretty interesting. Their desert rules are just darned interesting. They have digging in, which is another rule that's been added to the rule book. Very interesting. All troops dug in count as down. Makes them a lot harder to take out. Um,
Yeah.
they
They
have
still
water
don't let you
exhaustion.
dig in during a game though.
No, no, you
No.
start as dug in.
Yeah.
Um, and again, if and all of us are creative. If we wanted to do digging in during a game, it'd be easy enough to proxy. Um, but they got rules here for getting dehydrated, what sand can do to vehicles, and
Oh
more
yeah.
sand. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
How
So
about just getting
that
sand in your eyes?
sure,
You
sure.
know, that's why a lot of
Yeah.
those guys wore goggles in the desert.
Yep. Yeah. It wasn't an affectation. You had to keep that sand out of your eyes. And
Yeah.
so many of the vehicles are open topped or no windscreen or limited windscreen or just the sandstorms.
Yeah.
I've seen, Mojave Desert sandstorms and they're bad enough. Some of the stuff that blows in North Africa is just a disaster. And that was one of the things um, that we did is we had random sandstorms on our board, which really complicated people's firing solutions. I think we set a sandstorm cut your visibility either down to 12 inches or 3d6 or something like that. But yeah, really, again, we were trying to capture the vagaries of what it's like to fight in the desert. So,
Yeah.
these special
So
rules at the back of the book are really, really cool.
I would probably make it a random roll for severity of the sandstorm, and then the bigger, the more you know dense it is, or whatever, it would be
Yeah,
your visibility would drop accordingly.
yeah, yeah. Here they talk about attacking in the desert with the sun behind you, so the defender's dazzled. That's kind of cool. Hadn't thought about that. Um, the effects of dust trails. and then being able to see you. So that's pretty cool. Oh, here it is, desert weather. 1
Yeah.
to 6, everything from hey, something's coming to haze, mirage. Oh, that's pretty cool. Any unit that suffers mirage, any unit that fails an order test on any double, not just a double six, suffers a foobar. Oh Lord,
Oh,
that'd be awesome. And then sandstorm, everybody's favorite.
yeah.
So yeah, wow. And then a variant of fog of war, where your guys get scattered. And in talking to some people that have played in some of the tournaments that have had fog of war, they're like, "Oh man, that's just so unrealistic." Actually, I think given the scale that we play at, it's probably more realistic than not, because at the
Hmm.
squad platoon level, things could get really darn confused.
So that would be an interesting. We just mentioned that Japanese the beach scenario. Let's say a
Sure.
unit is caught in a sandstorm, and if they just go down or they don't move, they're fine. But if they try to move, they're going to roll in a random direction because they don't really know which way they're going.
Oh my gosh.
So if you want to
Yeah.
make an advance or a run, you got to throw the scatter dice, and that's the direction you go.
Wow. Wow. And again, um, if you're prepared for it, randomness in games can be very refreshing, because suddenly, it's not it's suddenly suddenly it's more of a cinematic than a chess game.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Let's tell a good story here. You want to play chess? Play chess. You want to tell a good story? Play a tabletop game. I know somebody asked me one time, well, what interests you in tabletop gaming? I'm like, it's the stories. It's the stories that the game tells. It's the story that the players tell. So that's really cool. Um, Here again, dug in, foxholes, trenches, gun pits, dug in with hidden deployment. So that's going to be a nice function, and also um, something to throw into the mix for a defender. Now, again, they do talk about digging in during a game. They just say we don't normally allow troops to dig in during the course of a game, but again, for a club game, it would be easy enough to modify that. Easy, They got rules for fortifications. And I just got to tell you, attacking fortifications is probably, or defending fortifications is probably my least favorite type of scenario. But what that probably means is that I need to play it a bit just to test my ability and just to sharpen it. So there you go. Minefields, everybody's favorite. So where these are coming out of too, Randy. Remember they said when they were briefing us on the version 3 rules that a lot of these have been in the theater selector books.
yeah.
And so, I really like that they brought them together. Again, so what special rules have you used so far during your I guess play tests that you've videoed or that you've done?
Well, really not so much, except maybe the recce
Okay.
platoon. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Well, you can bet that some of these special rules are going to be showing up on our tables, either in both casual and concealed minefields. How fun is that? um,
so I
Either
wonder how
both
you
in
do that.
casual play, sir.
Wonder how you do that. If you
Um,
had grids, you could secretly write down the grid of the minefield, I suppose. But since you don't have to actually grids, um,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's like
So
you'd have to be visible, really, technically.
right, and technically, and this is kind of interesting. It was years that I played games before I learned about this, but by international law, you're really supposed to mark a minefield. Some
Yeah,
people, obviously, a lot of people didn't for all kinds of
yeah,
reasons. Often because they were deploying the mines in a hurry. Other times because they wanted to, obviously surprise their opponents. But then on the other hand, marking a dummy minefield
yeah.
is
You want to slow
also
them down?
used.
Here you go. That's how you do it.
Sure. Yeah. Talking about unmarked minefields, right? Or marked minefields. Even a marked minefield, I can tell you from secondhand experience, may not be noticed. My dad was a radio telephone operator in the army in Vietnam. He strung a telephone cable across the field because it's the shortest distance between 2 points. He got to the other side of the field. They were like, that's a minefield. He's like, oh, So even if the minefield's marked, that doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to see it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So optional rules, man, they really spice things up. Booby traps, I love it. Oh gosh, Randy, booby traps in buildings. Yeah.
Hey, hold on.
There you go. What you got?
Hold on a second, Mike. Go ahead. Hey. Yeah. I'm doing the show right.
All right. We are back resumed. Randy had to take a quick break there.
Yeah.
So, you can, again, minefields, again, throw their an entire other level of warfare into it. Hidden deployment, always fun. Now here it is. They don't normally allow units to hide during the game, but you can, again, as a special rule. And the other thing is, too, all this will slow your game down. So, if you're going to play with some of this, you might want to dial your points down or limit the different types of troops that you have. The more layers of complexity you add, the slower the game's going to go. But again, it can be worth it. Now, here's one I don't see used a lot: night fighting.
Yeah.
Can't remember the last time I played a scenario using night fighting or had that as part of a scenario in a tournament. And again, I can tell you, before we run our tournament in March, I'll be digging through these optional rules, and you're going to see some of them on the table.
Yeah, we actually played in a tournament where they did a night. So each table had its own scenario, and this table was night. Yep. And so your visibility was limited to like 24 inches, maybe. Might have been 18. I can't remember, but every turn you roll for flares. And if a flare comes in, then you have normal visibility for that turn.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can use flares to give your visibility up. Oh, also, so you have flash, muzzle flash. So if you fired during that turn, it increased your visibility by like 6 inches or something to be spotted. So another unit could shoot back at you; they could see you.
Yeah, I think I would count the counter fire as concealed though. Because shooting at muzzle flashes is really a die roll.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's see. Yeah, so they talk about that. They have night fighting. And then they've got night fighting scenarios: night fight, flare, dawn assault, longest day. You start normal visibility at the start. And then it starts, I guess the sun starts to set. So some really cool things you can do when you're putting a game together, or you're putting putting a one-off game together. So I can guarantee you we'll be, I got up to the basic rules. I actually had forgotten about the big optional rule section, and I can guarantee you we're going to be digging into this because there's just so much fun. And I think definitely, I'm seeing rules here for tropical hazards, mud. I could definitely see doing mud on either an Eastern Front scenario or even a Western Front scenario if you're somewhere in Holland where the British did a lot of their fighting against the Germans. So you name it, and the new rules have it. Snow, ice, and frostbite, great for bulge scenarios. Something to think about. So night fighting in the snow, Randy. What do you think? Oh gosh.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Yeah. So I think what I'm wanting folks to take away from this one is this game is a heck of a toolbox. It really is. That's we can debate some of the mechanics, but I do got to give them a tip of the hat that the new version 3 gives you much better tools for what you're trying to do.
Well, they always
Wow.
had some of these, but they were
Yep.
buried inside campaign books, and when guys run tournaments, they just stayed away from the campaign books and just stuck to the basics. And now they've
Right.
kind of opened it up to where it's a little more playable in a tournament scenario, even, you know.
Yeah. I mean, as a TO, I can see me doing. I may not tell the players the scenarios before they get there, but I might say, hey, you'll want to be up on the following optional rules: night fighting, desert conditions, jungle fighting, jungle rules, and that way people can brief on that before they get there.
Yeah.
And that's, um, one of the other things, I was talking to Russell today, and I'll remind our viewers that if you're going to play this game, there is a commitment in learning the rules on a scale of 1 to 10. Um, Bolt Action starts at about a 6 and can go up to about a 10, depending on what rules and stuff that you're using. So it behooves you, and as a favor to your other players, to read the rules,
Yeah.
know at least how your units should function, and ideally know how your opponent's units should function. Um, hey, Randy, the other thing I want to put a plug in for, the miners. Have you downloaded any of the miner army lists?
No, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
I think I've got them on a link on my phone, so I can, get to them pretty easily. But
Yeah. Well, let's see. Our next show is going to be about the 12th, next Thursday. Um, we might want to talk. We'll talk. We'll pre-brief on our game. How's that sound? We'll make sure we'll have our army list ready by then. Lock them down,
yeah,
and we can brief on each other's army list and kind of what we're thinking. That'd be kind of cool, I think. And
yeah.
then,
Or I was I was kind of wanting to surprise you with. I've got a couple. I
what?
got a couple things in store, so we'll see how it goes. It's going to be pretty
Okay,
thematic, but nothing
yeah.
cheesy. But it's just going to be interesting.
Well, I think it'd be worthwhile to review the British Army rules together,
Mhm.
and review the German Army rules together again.
Yeah,
I think with our colleagues, and again, here we're playing a one-off, so I know what I'm going to face. So it behooves me to know my rules and the British rules,
yeah,
and just so I am less surprised. And honestly, people forget things. And
hmm
then I think I'll get with you before, but I think we'll look at a couple of the minor armies, specifically probably Hungary and Finland, both of which are seeing a lot of attention from our group. And we'll talk about both those have troops available from Warlord, but they also would lend themselves to this new veteran kit that's coming out and doing some kit bashing. So, uh, recapping our show here, um, use
yeah.
reserves, use them carefully. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we wanted to touch a little bit on the recce platoon and how some guys are utilizing this tool to spam forward observers.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
So without giving a guy's list away to getting into any details, uh, I've seen a list American list that has 4 forward air observers. And of course, the Americans get 2 bombardments per air observer. And the air observer is a little unique because it creates 2 bubbles of where it deals out pins. And so what this guy's doing is he's using these bubbles and crisscrossing them so that every unit gets hit multiple times by enough so much that they get pinned out before they even get a chance to move. When if everything comes in, if all 4 of them happen to come in on the same turn, then units
Right.
are getting pinned out. And then I cooked up a list of British that had 6 forward artillery observers. Of course, it had all home guard in it, but so you can take this recce platoon, and what it allows you to do is, so in order to get forward observers, you have to have rifle platoons, but you can
Right.
also take them in a recce platoon. and they only require one infantry squad. So that way,
Yep.
the only stipulation is so for every recce platoon, you have to have a rifle platoon. So, but it cuts down on how many squads of infantry you have to have in order to get all these forward observers. And it can just be, well, honestly, you know, and like I said, I ran a game a while back where I had just 2 British artillery observers, and it was absolutely devastating. The amount of pins that it put on the enemy when they all came in, it's just, I can't even imagine what 6 would do. It just blows my mind.
Wow. Yeah, I can. Yeah. I'm just kind of like, no, thank you.
It wouldn't be any fun.
Man.
I really honestly don't think it would be much fun. Now, three's probably the tipping point. You could run 3 and have a decent force, but you just imagine the amount of damage you do with 3 observers.
Jeez. Yeah. So yeah, each platoon can have a recce platoon attached to it. Yeah, that's just nasty.
And having extra infantry is not a bad thing anyway, because you need them for objectives. So
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things I think, you know, and we can't emphasize this enough. I think that the days of these small squad are much reduced, if not completely eliminated, because they're just so fragile,
yeah,
and you can't hold nothing with them. Yeah, so your recce platoon has to have one headquarters and at least one squad can't be engineers. But you can attach an FO, and you can attach an anti-tank team.
yep.
And then if you do put them in vehicles, everybody has to be motorized.
Yeah. So
yeah.
the other benefit of that is, and it, I think it gets overlooked, is so for every man in the recce platoon, you have to have enough transport capacity.
Right.
But there's nothing that says you can't have more transport than you have infantry. So every vehicle you place in a recce platoon has to have that 10-point tax on it, but it's now recce. You can use them for the rest of your army. So it allows you to take recce vehicles where you couldn't normally take recce vehicles before. You know, you could have a deuce and a half with recce. You couldn't do that before. An LVT with, you know, all these machine guns on it. You can, for 10 points, you make it recce. Well, all of a sudden it's survivable now. You know, a Panzerfaust can't take it out.
You know, I would want to get a ruling on that one actually, because you have to add transport for the infantry units, but I don't think it's a can add. I think it's a must add.
Right, but it doesn't say you have to use them for them.
No, that's true. You can make the recce platoon go on foot and then take their transport and put it with somebody else. That's a fair point. Yeah. Not entirely sure why you would do that. I guess if you considered your recce platoon.
Well, all right. So,
Oh,
like in the case of the company commander, what
right.
I'm doing is I'm bringing a recce platoon, and I'll make my little scout car, a scout or a Brin, either one of them, will be recce. And then instead of using it for my troops in the recce platoon, I'll put my company commander in it, and then he can sit out in the middle of the board and dish out his bonuses. And if he gets shot at, I can just recce off into cover somewhere, and he's safe.
Okay. So I have to have 2 people hunting your Bren carrier next week. Got it. Bracket. All right. Well, very good. Okay. What else? What else you got?
What have I got? I don't know.
So I think we brought a lot of value here.
Yeah.
Talked about reserves and how to use them. A couple of specialist platoons, and you're going to continue to see all kinds of discussion on these. And I'm thinking at some point, I'm hoping at some point, Warlord is going to come down with a little bit more guidelines on standardizing some of this and cutting some of the cheese back. But in the meantime, just be flexible.
I think TOs will be I'm seeing 3 max on anything cheesy, and that's probably a fair amount.
Yep.
You know, And
So
I
the
would like
American
to
Air Observer, you
see
say 3 max.
a maximum of unlimited rifle platoons, but
Right.
a maximum of one of any other kind. And that would cut out a lot of spam. Of course, you still could
It
have
would.
the forward observer spam if they do that. They could just bring a bunch of rifle platoons with
Sure.
observers,
Sure.
but that would be kind of
Yeah.
expensive if they did that.
Yeah. But to your point, now that you can field, before we used to take 2 platoons of infantry because we wanted to have 2 tanks or 2 armored cars
Yep.
or 2 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can take that 1 platoon of infantry and you can back it up with a full section of tanks, section of
Yeah.
armored cars. So I think you're right. I think the tweak and the fix is probably going to be to kind of go back to, source and say, okay, your core force is the infantry platoon. All the specialist guys, no more than 1.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to your point, it can get really crazy. But hey, in the meantime, where we are is be watching for all kinds of fun lists out there, guys. Take advantage of your opponent's mistakes. Every one of these lists that we talked about, even the weird ones, they've got things that are OP, but they've got weaknesses too. And as commanders, we've got to not be too so intimidated by the power of somebody's list that we don't look for their weaknesses and take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And then special rules. Don't be shy to use them. Be looking for them certainly in tournaments because I can imagine TOs are going to really start to learn these rules and throw them in for some more flavor in the
Yeah.
scenarios. As you talk about, and I talked about this last week, tabletop miniature gaming, your forces tend to be somewhat fixed because your players have only so much they're going to invest in. So, like last week, I played Greeks versus Italians on a board game. Well, that's because it's in the counter mix. It's easy. The variety that you're going to see on a tabletop game is going to be in your objectives and in your terrain. And that's where you're going to get the big variety. Not so much in your, and especially if you're playing with the same guys all the time, not necessarily so much in your forces, but in the situations you make those forces confront. So that's really important. All right. Well, it's been an hour and it's been a good hour. And we've talked about reserves, optional rules, and unusual platoon formations.
Yeah.
So be watching for Randy. We have a couple of ideas, sneaky stuff he might try and pull off. We'll have to talk about that after offline for our game next week. No cheesy, Randy.
Are we going to do it
Score.
live, or are you going to have to record it and post it?
Probably going to record and post it.
Yeah.
And that'll give us an opportunity to edit as we go. So again, we got the vote. That we're actually this game is a result of input from our viewers. We took a poll and said, what 2 armies would you guys like to see fight out of Germans, Americans, and British? And the vote came down Germans versus British. And Randy loves to play him some British, so he's going to do the Brits. And I don't mind playing the Jerrys. I have a lot of fun with them. So I'll be showing the Jerrys, and I'm looking forward to putting them on the table. So there you go. All right. I think with all that being said, Randy, you got anything else for the folks?
No, that's about all for me.
Fantastic. Oh, one more thing. Statesboro this Saturday.
Yep.
Big
mega battle.
Pearl Harbor themed mega battle bolt action. So if you're anywhere near Statesboro, get over to Galactic Comics. They're going to be having a big bolt action day. That's all I know. If you want more, look on our Facebook group.
It's a 12x4 table is what they're going to be playing on.
That's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So take you some troops, take you some money for snacks and sodas, and have a good time. All right, guys. That's it from the Mike and Randy show for this week, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.